Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is August 31st, 2022, and this is your daily Ukraine update. And we are going to be asking just what has happened in the Kherson offensive and what can we expect to happen. Let's get into it. First off, of course, we have the map, and there's really only one significant change to the map overall. There's since obviously a ton of updates into what are contested areas. You can see fighting continuing near Pisky, but the most significant update to speak of is actually in this region here, where you can see there's been some changes to this area here, where some areas, well, it's not even clear. Some more areas are contested. This is, of course, near Nikopol. As you might recall, the big nuclear power plant is right around here. But then you also have, of course, some small territorial changes right here. This area near the village of Kherson has been liberated by Ukraine. Interesting because it actually either they affected a river crossing, which seems very unlikely, or they pushed down south and created this salient here up against the river. There's also, of course, some changes. Let's see if we can find them real quick. Just some minor adjustments to this territory here. Again, it's listed as a contested region and not liberated, so these are all pretty minor changes. You might be asking, but Paul, the news tells me that there is a huge, tons of fighting taking place on the Kherson front, and there is very little movement. The reason is because the Ukraine Ministry of Defense has said they have requested an operational blackout of updates on the front lines, and generally this map is conservative. It usually seems to want two sources of verifiable info that a region or town has been lost. So for example, if both sides depict themselves, entering a town and withdrawing from it, or really they seem to prefer official announcements from ministries of defense that regions have been seized or that withdrawals have happened. And the Ukraine Ministry of Defense, of course, is not announcing any seizures along this line, though it's generally believed that they have seized some level of territory, right? So what does this mean in the larger sense for the Kherson offensive? Well, the answer is that it is indeed underway. Ukrainian forces have been mercilessly harassing, among other positions, the pontoon ferries that Russia has had to resort to get supplies across the Dnipro River, right? This is this river here, and as you can see, it's been cut off from all the bridges have been cut off, right? Or I believe this one may still be intact, but it's a good way from Kherson itself. And so continues to disrupt supply lines, Ukrainian forces have been hitting pontoon ferries that they've been using to ferry across supplies. So they are continuing to try to starve out Russian troops, and the Ukrainian military, of course, is continuing to otherwise harass and prevent the movement of supplies to Russian troops in Kherson. But this says, according to Institute for the Study of War, and frankly, it lines up with the Ukraine military's Ministry of Defense statements themselves, that this is a systematic effort. This is going to look more like when the Russians seized Lysychansk, right? It's going to be a systematic, bite by bite taking of this territory, and there's an expectation that we're not going to see stunning victories, right? The Russians tried this. The U.S. is sort of famous for marching into Baghdad in 3 days, covering hundreds of miles of territory. But that's a very different military, and it's a very different terrain. This is the reality. When you have two peers fighting, you take the victories you can take. As we've seen, Russia has come to the exact same conclusion. They tried to push hard into Kiev. They ultimately failed and realized that their best operational successes have been systematically biting off chunks of territory. We saw it as they seized Severodonetsk, they seized Lysychansk, and it was just every day, every other day, bite-sized pieces of territory, but those can often culminate in major victories. So should expect to see, if the counteroffensive is successful, we should expect to see exactly that. Bite-sized victories, seizing territory piece by piece from the Russian forces. Again, all the while putting the squeeze on Russian forces, right? Making sure that they can't get the supplies they need, because as the fighting intensity ramps up, their need for supplies, medical supplies, fresh troops, ammunition, spare parts is going to also increase exponentially. So the goal is to, right now they have the logistics set up for a sort of low or medium intensity fight, right? Russia's known a counteroffensive is coming. They've probably shored up their supplies somewhat, but the idea is to ratchet up their need to a point and diminish their ability to provide, and exploit the fact that Russian troops will be hungry, thirsty, and low on ammunition. So anyway, guys, that is the update for today. As always, of course, you've probably seen that the spiciest combat videos, the most intense stuff, isn't really on YouTube, right? The stuff that's on there now is still good, but it's not those top tier firefight videos, which is fine. That's YouTube's right to like censor content. But I've moved them all onto the Patreon. So if you guys want to support the channel and see my breakdowns of some of the most intense combat footage coming out of this conflict, you want to come over to the Patreon. Thanks to our lieutenant tier patrons, and I will see you guys in the next one.